So thank you for coming back. I know it's been 2 months, and I do want to apologize for not posting in a while. I got a bit self-conscious about, telling this story. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened over the past 15 years that I'm pretty ashamed of. There's also a lot of really huge accomplishments that I've kind of overcame in recovery. And so I just was kind of self-conscious about putting all this stuff out there. The big black folder. I've carried this around with me since I can remember. I always thought that carrying around important documents, I was being like an adult. And this folder has literally everything about me and how much debt I owed pre-recovery and post-recovery. And so this episode, I wanted to talk about having that amount of debt when you're about to get sober.
Hey, cuz. Heard you're having money problems.
No, you didn't.
Listen, I got the answer. You declare bankruptcy, all your problems go away.
And how daunting that may be for some of us. I know it was daunting for myself. And, this folder right here, these pink and yellow documents, these are all from the state of Arizona. I had probably over a dozen cases from 3 DUIs, from possession, theft, just a bunch of stuff. There's another folder in here for the IRS. There's another folder in here for friends and family. There's another folder in here for repossessions of vehicles. And if you're joining me in this topic, is something that you're dealing with, because of one, kratom addiction, opiate addiction, alcoholism, whatever you're going through. Gambling is another big one for some guys. And you feel that it's completely unmanageable and you don't know that there's a way out. There is. And I want to explain some of the things that I've done over the years to help with that. So I had a big issue. I knew I owed a lot of money to a lot of different people, establishments and places and governments, and I didn't know really where to start. And so I had a sponsor and 12-step recovery groups at the time, and he, I said, hey, I might need to file bankruptcy.
I declare bankruptcy!
And he said, absolutely not. I think bankruptcy does have its place for some people, but, I spent most of my life running from different things, and debt was one of those things that I ran from. I did not check my credit. I could care less about credit. I took out payday loans all over the city, various different places. I never filed my taxes, ever. I never once filed my taxes. And I would go exempt on all my checks while I was making a pretty good amount of money in sales. And I would never pay my fines either. So when it came to the state of Arizona, on certain fines, I had 3 DUIs at this point, and DUIs are very, very expensive. And they would set me up on the smallest little things, like $50 a month, and I just was incapable of paying my bills on time. And so the sponsor at the time, Charlie, said, look, there's no more running. We're not going to run from this shit anymore. We're going to put it down all on paper, and we're going to develop a game plan. And this is where the envelope system really came into play. And this was before, Dave Ramsey was a big thing. And Charlie had me outline every little thing that I owed. And we started just to chisel away at this stuff. And I had an envelope system. And so if there was, if I wanted to go out to a meeting and go have some food afterwards and have some coffee, there was an envelope for that. There was an envelope for the IRS. There was an envelope for my mom. There was an envelope for friends and family. There was an envelope for, my car payment, my bus fare. I didn't have a car payment. Nobody would give me a car. And so every little thing was tracked meticulously for the first few years of recovery. One, so I could just learn how to manage my finances because I had no clue. And two, it held me accountable because I knew if I had to pay the IRS, I had to pay the state of Arizona. And if I didn't have any money in my going out to eat or my fun little folder, that shit just was not going to happen that night. And I had to take it from my IRS folder to go to get some coffee, right? And it just didn't set right with me anymore because I couldn't get a bank account. I was on what they call check systems, and that's when you bounce too many checks. The banking system has kind of oversight to where you cannot get a checking account. And so I would take my little check, and I was not making a lot of money at the time. I was like a customer service rep, right out of treatment. And I would take my little $300 or $400 check down to the check cashing place, and I would take that money and I would put it into an envelope system that me and my sponsor had set up. And sponsors really aren't designed to help you do that. They're there to help you stop drinking. But Charlie had kind of the same experience with finances, and I think that's why he helped me. And thank God for that, So who is the most important to pay off first? And if you're new in recovery, this can be a really loaded topic. Do I pay my mom and my dad back because they, I borrowed a lot of money from them? Do I pay the IRS back? Do I pay the state of Arizona or XYZ back? So I think it's important to categorize these in very important kind of, like what are the consequences of not paying each one of these things? And there's a lot of friends and family that were really mad at me for not being able to pay them back the whole amount of money right away. But when the IRS wants their money, that they're gonna get it one way or another. And they ended up putting a lien on my social security number. So that meant I was landlocked. I could not do anything. If I bought a car, I could not sell that car. If I bought a house, I could not sell that house. Anything would have to go to the IRS because of that lien. So they were very important to start with. The second place that was extremely important was the state of Arizona. State of Arizona, I owed in excess of $12,000 in fines, and they had to be paid right away. I owed the taxes for the state of Arizona, and I had fines. So it was two different areas for the state of Arizona. Now the state garnished my wages right out the gates of treatment. They said, look, Cody, you've been running for X amount of years. We're not doing this with you anymore. We're gonna just take a portion of your paycheck. And that one, I had to learn the hard way, right? There was no, can I pay you this? Can I pay you that? They just straight up garnished my wages. And so the court system, however, if you don't pay your fines with the court system, typically they're gonna put out a warrant for your arrest. Now, that was probably the most important place that I had to pay back, or at least put on a payment plan. And so I went to go see the judge and said, look, I understand you just graduated treatment and you're doing great, but you're gonna need to pay this back. And I said, fine, well, I'm here to make amends. Whatever I need to do to make my side of the street clean is what I'm willing to do. And he set me up on a payment plan. And I found with most of these government municipalities, whether it's the IRS, the states, the courts, if you're honest with them and you're genuine and you're trying to stay sober and you're in early recovery and they can see that you're working, they're gonna work with you. At least that was my experience. They put me on a payment plan and they were willing to work with me with what I could do. And a lot of the guys in early sobriety, I think they think they're not gonna be able to eat, or they're not gonna be able to pay their rent or their car payment. And what I found for each one of these government places is that I never went hungry. I always went to bed with food in my stomach, and I always had a roof over my head. I may have not had the things that I wanted all of the time, but because I was trying to stay sober and I was trying to do the next right thing, I think the places understood that I was sincere in what I was trying to do. And so if you're worried about that, don't worry about that. You will be able to, you're not going to be shopping at Whole Foods every week, but you're going to be able to buy groceries. You're going to be able to, take the bus to work. You're going to be able to pay your sober living rent. I started to really kind of work on the big ones first. That was the main thing. And that for the first 2 to 5 years of recovery, it was just focusing on those 3 things: IRS, state of Arizona taxes, and the fines that I had to pay. Because if I did not pay those, the government would either throw me in jail or they would garnish my wages. And if I'm in jail, I can't be of service. I can't go to my meetings. I can't be a productive member of society. I can't do what I need to do. So I needed to make sure there was not warrants out for my arrest. So those 3 things came first, and the people around me co-signed off of that. Like, yeah, you need to pay those guys first. So there was an envelope for each one of those 3 places. And then friends and family got circulated into that mixture shortly after that. Within probably, within that 2 to 5 year range, I was starting to set up payment plans with, my aunts and uncles and my mom, which would take out payday loans for me. And the whole thing about these amends is I just wanted to walk into anywhere, or when I wanted my credit ran, and I wanted to be free. I did not want to run anymore from any of this stuff. And so, that's the whole purpose of doing this, is so you can feel free. I've spent most of my life running away from my problem. And ultimately, you're a cash business. The first few years of recovery, because I couldn't open a checking account, because I could not get a credit card, because my credit score was in like the 400s, I didn't have the luxury of, paying people off with credit or anything. And so I had to manage my cash very, very well for the first at least 5 to 6 years of recovery. I remember when I first got my first credit card, it was like a Capital One card. It was like 30 bazillion% interest, and it was like a $200 limit. And I think a great place to start once you start climbing your way out of this is download an app like Credit Karma. Credit Karma was instrumental in my recovery just because it set a baseline. It let me know what was actually reporting on my credit, what I could work on, what I needed to work on, and it would also, like, when my score started creeping up into like the low 600s, like mid 600s, which is, on the spectrum, it's not good, but it's something. They start like, hey, you should get this secured credit card for like $250. And a secured credit card is basically you're using your own money to get a credit line. So a bank will say, hey, give me $250 of your money, and I'm going to give it back to you in the form of a credit card. And then that will help you build your credit. And so, like I said, I started to use Credit Karma to figure out, what was going on with my finances. And that's something that I had never done before. I do not come from money. I grew up in trailer parks. My family just did not have any money. I was very, very poor. And so some of this stuff that you're supposed to be taught as a kid, I didn't get any of that stuff. And that's nothing against them. I don't think they had the best teachers themselves either. And so I started to use Credit Karma, and then that started to rebuild my credit. And sure enough, what started to happen, I'd pay off that little $250 credit card from Capital One. And then one day they gave me a line of like $2,500. I was like, oh my goodness, I've made it. What am I gonna do? And I start to manage like my credit card very well. And I would just pay my cell phone bill, or I'd pay, the water bill or something. And then I would pay it off because I was so scared to mess it up. And so Credit Karma is a really, really good tool, sort of app that you can use to manage your credit, because you need to know where you stand. After you get the big stuff handled with the IRS, the state, child support, friends and family, you want to start working on your credit. And so within the first 5 years, I'm really dialing things in. Everybody's getting paid. For the most part, everybody is getting paid. I had a few scares there. Most of the time I had a pretty consistent job, and things were getting paid on time, and I was really, making huge strides and the credit was starting to come back. But every now and then I would have a curveball thrown at me. Things that I thought I had covered, I flat out forgot about, you know? And so every now and then I'd have a new charge come up. Not something from that I committed, but it was like, oh, wait, hold on. You owed this payday loan place $1,200. Or, hey, you had this car repossessed back in 2002 and now there's a judgment out for you. And so there was a bunch of landmines that happened along the way as well. But I dealt with everything in a spiritual manner. And I knew if I was in recovery, if I knew if I was trying to stay sober, because I just started to trust in the process that one day I would get out of it. But you really have to accept the fact that I'm gonna take the bus for the first probably 4 years of my recovery because I don't have a license. The state won't give me a license. I'm gonna have a breathalyzer for probably the next 2 to 3 years because after that I had to get a breathalyzer. And then for major purchases like actually buying a car, nobody wanted to give me a car. I had to go buy 3 different cars from Cactus Jacks. Now these are auto loan places that are buy here, pay here. Meaning they don't really require a credit score. So they're gonna kill you on the payment and the interest. But that's the only people that would give me a car. And I didn't want to take the bus anymore in 110-degree weather in Phoenix, Arizona in July. So I was just so happy that somebody was able to give me a car. And I remember my first little car was a little Suzuki Forenza and it had a breathalyzer. And I remember, you know, my sponsor telling me at the time, you know, you better go help some people with that car. And I would drive to my meetings and I would take guys to meetings, to 12-step recovery groups. And that's what I did. And I was so grateful for that car. But you're gonna have to accept the fact that this is just gonna take some time. And I know some of you are not in the position that I was in. I think debt is all relative. It's just, you know, oh my God, I have $5,000, it's the end of the world, you know. It's not. It's you could totally get out of it if you're honest and sincere and you're willing to pay it back. So let's fast forward to, you know, 10 years in and things are going well. And I start to, you know, dabble with kratom and some of these other gray area substances that I've had to reset my sobriety with. You know, I never really burned down my credit to the ground like I did before, but I've done some really dumb stuff in recovery. Because I can't drink and use, it just doesn't work for me anymore. It makes things worse. I can get really high on buying things or eating or some other ism that I have. And so I made some really dumb purchases, you know, especially while using, you know, substances like kratom. Because there was that state of euphoria there, I would go out and my favorite thing to do on kratom was to go shop and to go, you know, spend money on myself because I think I deserved that stuff. I had been in recovery for over a decade. I manage my finances well. I own a home. I have 2 cars, right? My credit score is in the 800s. You know, why can't I go out and treat myself a little bit? So I've done some really dumb stuff in recovery with money too, and I've kind of tripped up on it. But I'm able to catch it really quickly because I just never want it to get to a point that it was in 2007 when I first came in. And so just to kind of you know, close everything out on how I was able to do this. One, I had to get it down on paper. Write down every little thing that you owe. Put it down on paper. And I think the Dave Ramsey program is actually a really, really good place to start. You know, because I couldn't get credit and I had this envelope system, and you can just Google, you know, Dave Ramsey envelope system, and it's a really good way to kind of start to be able to manage your finances again. So that was the first thing, is I had to write it all down and I had to get with somebody that I trusted to help to hold myself accountable. And that for me was my first sponsor. And so if there was a big purchase that I had, whether it was buying a car or buying a house or taking an inquiry for a credit card, buying some sort of luxury purchase, getting my first apartment. All that stuff had to be ran by somebody that I trust. And it doesn't have to be a sponsor. It could be anybody. It could be an accountant. It could be your mom or your dad if they're good with money. It could be your spouse if they're good with money. I just knew that I wasn't good with money, and my best thinking with money in particular, is typically off, or it's wrong initially. So I had to get accountable to somebody, and I ran those big purchases through that person. Is this a good idea? And we would cover it, And then the third component to all this is, once you finally do get everything paid off, not to ruin it again. Really, I think our whole system is buy now, pay later in the United States, right? And as addicts, I can probably encompass my whole life as a buy now, pay later system, right? I'm gonna get high and I'm gonna pay for this later. Whether that's the drugs, the alcohol, or the money and the finances, I'm gonna buy now and pay for it later. I don't wanna pay for it now. And so I had to get rid of that mentality of putting things off. I'm no longer running from any of my creditors anymore. So if you do run into those landmines in recovery, and you feel that it's something that you cannot get out of, if a guy like me with $150,000+ in debt can get out of it, it didn't happen overnight. Like I said, it took some years. You just have to stay the course. You really have to trust in the process that one day this will end. And what started to happen is the IRS ended up doing an offer in compromise, meaning they settled out that debt because I had a good payment history with them. The state of Arizona taxes, they got paid back every penny of their money because that's just what had to happen. So they garnished my wages until the end. The state of Arizona for court, they ended up getting paid every penny back because fines have to get paid back. I can walk into any room at any sort of family event, and I don't owe anybody any money or any explanation anymore. And I can walk into any pretty much bank right now and do whatever I need to do financially. And I'm no longer scared to get my credit pulled, like crossing my fingers that I'm gonna get approved or not. And I think that's a really cool place to be, to kind of get to a place where, you're completely shot out, credit is gone, there's no hope, and then you can do stuff later in your recovery, and you can walk into a bank and you can get the best deal possible for yourself, And so, the apps like Credit Karma and using that certain technology to monitor your credit. I still monitor my credit probably daily or weekly because I'm kind of obsessed about it. I check my scores all the time. And I didn't have to file bankruptcy. I didn't have to cut corners. Like I said, this was a very long and arduous process. But I was able to do it with a lot of people that love me and a lot of people that are around me that help me. My wife, we work as a team in order to manage our finances. And there's a reserve amount of money in the bank. Like if there's an emergency, like if I have to get the tires changed on the truck, right? Like I'm not freaking out to go do that. And emergencies don't scare me anymore. I don't have to go take out a payday loan to pay my power bill, I remember I used to have to, the power company would not even trust me to pay my power on time. They would give me a prepaid card called an M-Power card, and I would have to pay for my power on a daily basis, or however much I could afford. So some days it was like $5. I could afford $5 worth of power. And that's how low I was when it came to managing my finances. Wrap this up, like I said, if you're struggling with debt, just know that there is a way out, but you're gonna have to get accountable. You are no longer a victim. Write it down all on paper, monitor it every single day. And as long as you stay sober and you're trying to do the next right thing, you will get out of it. It will end someday. I can guarantee you that. Actually, I've worked with a lot of guys over the years, and it's absolutely amazing to see them, completely shot out in rehab to buying their first home, and putting their kids in school and buying their first car and things like that. You just don't give up no matter what, And so Thank you for hanging out with me today. I love this topic because it's something that I think that we don't talk about a lot. And there was nobody really, I had to kind of dig deep with this thing. And so if you liked what you heard, click like and subscribe. If not, no worries. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.
Creed Bratton has never declared bankruptcy. When Creed Bratton gets in trouble, he transfers his debt to William Charles Schneider.